Hello, everyone. My name is Ann Shade. I will be moderating today on the panel Stepping Up about heroines. We're going to be talking about what makes a good fiction heroine. And I'm going to be speaking with these wonderful authors surrounding me. We have Rachel E. Bailey, Kimberly Cooper Griffin, Erin Dutton, Jessa Thoma. Did I say that right? I'm sorry. Yes. Carson Tate, and the, of course, wonderful Radclyffe. I'm going to go around and have you guys introduce yourself by telling us what you're working on currently, as well as something about you that you consider is a good heroine trait. So I'm going to start with Rachel. How about you?
Hi, I'm Beetle Bailey. My pen name's Rachel E. Bailey. Was my old name, now my legal name's Beetle. What I'm working on now is too many things that do not seem to be panning out. COVID just kind of wrecked my brain for everything that isn't current events. So written a lot of current events essays, not so much fiction. So what makes a good heroine?
Well, what about you is a good heroine trait? Give us your heroine trait.
Oh, I guess a sort of willingness to stare directly into the painful things. No matter how you respond to it, how the character responds or how I respond, sarcasm, tears, whatever it is, I think the important part is being willing to look at the painful stuff, even if it takes time, even if you have to do it in bits, even if it takes you forever to process, being willing to look at the painful things, I think, is a really good start. So.
That's a good one. Jessie?
I am Jessie Thoma. I'm working on a follow-up to the book that I have out this month, Serenity. Hopefully my editor doesn't rip it to shreds. She usually does. I think that's one of my traits that's decent, is I can take criticism pretty well, and I like to think that I can learn from it. I actually enjoy getting the edits back and seeing all the red track changes. I think I'm pretty loyal too. I think once you've earned my trust, I'm on your side.
Rad?
I am hopefully, prayerfully going to finish Treacherous Seas in a week or two, which is book number 11 in the Provincetown Tales. So that's what I'm working on right now. I just wrapped up Enchanted Hunt, which will be out in September. So those are my current projects. And I think the characteristic I would choose is failure is not an option.
Kimberly?
Gosh, I don't even know if I could follow up on those heroine traits there.
Sure you can, come on.
Right now I'm working on a manuscript, a sweet romance. I needed it in today's day. I just needed to get rid of everything. I'm working on a sweet romance called Colorado Red. I have not pitched it yet, so we'll see where that goes. As far as heroine traits, I am probably loyal to a fault to my friends. If they're my friends and there's nothing is ever going to come between us. I think that's probably it.
Good trait.
Thanks.
Erin?
I'm Erin Dutton. I'm not going to talk about what I'm working on because there's a long and twisted story about how I just recently became okay with the fact that I'm not working on anything right now. But I will say that 3 Alarm Response came out in June, so that's kind of my most recent baby. And since 2 people already said loyalty, I'm going to go with one of my more recently acquired traits. I have been developing my ability to deal with change and kind of pivot in a new direction whenever I need to.
All right. It's a good one too, especially today. Carson?
So I'm Carson Tate. I have recently released these 2 things. Drawn is a romantic suspense. It came out in June. And Still Not Over You, I have a novella sandwiched between a novella by Jenny Frame and Allie Bally about second chance romance. I'm currently working on a kind of a Medium style. If you saw the television show Medium back in the day, courtroom suspense romance with a psychic and a prosecutor, and
Love that.
called Spirit of the Law, and that'll be out next year. And so loyalty was what I had written down here on my menu. But I'd also written vulnerability, and knowing that you're vulnerable to certain things and knowing what those are. I think that's important.
Okay. All right. And next question is, has your image of a heroine changed since you first started writing books? Radclyffe, you have so many. So through the years, has your idea of what your heroine would look like changed through the years?
Yeah, I'm going to make a comment about the terms because I always do. And I know why we're using heroine, because obviously most of us are, or many of us are writing novels in which we have two female leads. And traditionally, the terms are gendered. There's a hero and a heroine, and they had distinctly different characteristics, and they often had different roles to play. And I think as we've adopted the genres that we write, to write characters that are not necessarily gendered in that way, we've had to rethink what hero and heroine really means. For me, I write archetypical alpha heroes in the very traditional meaning of the word almost, in that for me, I generally have one character who is driven, who has either ideals or a sense of duty that drives them, and they tend to drive the action of the story. And because they personify those ideals, that leads to the characteristics that they display, which for me are usually protectiveness, willingness to serve, sacrificing for others, and some other things that probably all of you recognize in my books. And that really hasn't changed. Even if I'm not writing an intrigue, or if I'm not writing cops, or I'm not writing military characters, one of my characters will generally be driven in some way in that fashion. And are then countered by the second character, who traditionally would be typified as the heroine, but in our work really isn't. And that balance tends to play out pretty much unchanged in all my works.
Okay. All right. Jesse, what about your works? Has your heroine changed through your works, through your writings?
So up until this current work, I would have said not really. Since I was a kid, I've loved superheroes, like long before it was cool to be a fan of superheroes. And kind of that is, I think, like a very stereotypical superhero, like trait, hero ideal of what that is, sort of supersized. And so kind of what I take as heroes can be pulled from that. And it's not spangly tights. But so I kind of, the characteristics, the humanity of superheroes, what I view as heroic, has always kind of pulled from that, not exclusively. Who gets to be labeled a hero, that kind of stuff has always been interesting for me from a point of view of superheroes. But I'm writing a book right now, coincidentally, with a main character that's a cop. And this is an interesting time to be writing a character that's a police officer. And so it's really made me think of who gets labeled automatically as a hero without really much question, who has to work to be labeled a hero, what traits make somebody a hero. And so I've really actually thought a lot about what truly makes somebody a hero and who just gets the label slapped on them because of a job or a uniform they put on, etc. So I think up until this current book that I'm working on, maybe my definition didn't change so much. And I don't know that it changed so much with this work, but I definitely thought a lot more about it.
So with the current things happening, you're from the time that you started it to now, has the concept of how you're going to write the character and how they're going to appear to everyone really come to to kind of match up with the times now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's made me think a little bit more, which I realize also kind of makes me think about what a privilege it is for me as a white woman to not have to have thought about that in the past. Like, of course, police officers shouldn't be labeled as heroes automatically, but, I've not had to really examine that too much in my daily life. So it's been a nice wake-up call, I guess, to really kind of also examine my own thoughts and beliefs about the world that I'm walking through a little bit ignorantly. So it's been a lot of re-examining that is uncomfortable, and also I'm glad I'm doing it.
Okay. And Rachel, what about you? Has your idea of your heroine changed?
I would say actually a lot since the first book I published, which was with Bold Strokes. I've had so many different reckonings over like the past 4 or 5 years, where it's like gender and sexuality and all those things, and race, and it's been such a turning point, like 5-6 years worth of turning point for me, that whereas my hero was, automatically usually female, and I've had to change that, and I'm like leaning more toward agender and non-binary characters now, or at least one of them in the spotlight. I tend to have like 3 characters that are kind of like main, and at least one of them I prefer to have them be agender and like ace arrow representation. So my heroines used to be kind of cookie cutter. And even when I was writing heroines of color, it was kind of like, it felt like I was writing through like a coffee filter or something, where I'm filtering out all of the things. Like if I'm writing a black heroine, which, or, I sometimes did, I would be filtering out all the things in my experience that I felt were integral to my blackness, and I would kind of filter them out for the character, because it seemed like it wouldn't be well taken, it would be too much, it would shrink an audience, and that was initially kind of what I was writing toward. Now when I write, it's kind of like, you've got to add the things that are who you are, because that's going to be the real thing that pulls people in. When they read it, they're either going to relate and go, that's me exactly, I get this character, and keep reading, or they're going to go, I didn't know anybody, is this the only person who, and it's maybe a little bit of an eye-opener. So my heroines these days, or heroes, or whoever they are, I still lean towards anti-heroes, people who are kind of like the Frodo Baggins, where it's like, could you take this ring? Because I don't want this ring. This ring's awful. Take the ring. No, I really don't want the ring. Take the ring. That's my hero, and they eventually do the right thing. And even if they're ethically there, they're not necessarily up to the challenge of it, of actually doing the good thing. And I like exploring that character arc of like, realizing that, okay, I have to do the good thing because it's the good thing and I'm the only one, and getting to the point of, I have to do this good thing, not just because I'm the only one and it has to get done, but because I would want someone to do that for me and for everyone I care about if I couldn't do it. I can't expect something of other people that I'm not willing to do myself. And I like getting my anti-heroes to that point. And then through that point, where they're like, yeah, I saved the world. Now, about my stock portfolio. It's like, I did you guys a solid, that's great, but rent's coming up. So I like having that anti-hero who learns to be a hero, but it's kind of a mantle they can take off. It's like, I saved the world, what more do you want? Where's my check? So, I used to try to write really altruistic, like, I must save everyone, because everyone. So I don't do that as much anymore. I'm sorry, I'm rambling. But that's the biggest change, is like making more real characters. Real people are afraid of doing the right thing sometimes. Yeah. And, you got to put yourself in there too. And it's scary and vulnerable, but it makes for the best characters.
Those are my favorite heroes. The anti-heroes are my favorite ones usually.
Wait, nobody said there'd be no money for saving the world. There has to be some kind of, do I get a medal? Maybe a day, like I Save the World Day, and everybody has to celebrate and they get off from work. That's my anti-hero right there. They'll do the good thing, but they want some applause, some money thrown.
Yeah. And Carson, what about you?
So it was interesting hearing both of Jesse and Rachel's take on this, because I came to writing while I was in a career as a criminal defense attorney, so I saw a different side of federal agents and cops and who are traditionally the heroes in books were sometimes, the people I was fighting against on behalf of my clients. So I think that really informed my view, and you'll often see that the heroes in my books are the defense attorneys and the private detectives and the people who are working for the little guy, not the big government or conglomerate. And I think that, but I also have ingrained in me that idea that that the uniform, means something, and maybe that's because it should, those should be the heroes, those people that we identify as a society to protect us and take care of us should step up and be the heroes. But I think my writing has evolved to the point where I think a lot of my heroes are the regular people stepping up, and kind of like Rachel was saying, they step up in the moment and do what they need to do, whether or not they are in a position that normally affords them hero status. So.
Okay. And Erin, has your hero changed?
I think that my idea of a hero probably hasn't changed, but the kinds of heroes that I'm writing has, and I think some of that just comes with time. When I think of writing heroes, heroines, I immediately think of my first responders books. And, there's a very clear, like Brad said, kind of definition of who those people are and what they're driven by and their sense of duty. Kind of trying to paint them as the person that should wear the uniform and that deserves to wear the uniform. But I think at the beginning I was maybe writing younger heroes, younger in their career. So they were the kind of take all the risks and, jump into the fire and kind of people. And then here recently I've written, a few in their 40s that have the experience to say, you know what, I'm going to let the younger guy do that, and I'm going to do the smart thing and still be the hero. So just kind of, I think the maturity maybe of the characters I'm writing has, elevated with my own life experience, I guess.
So since they've elevated with their maturity, have they become less risky in their adventures?
I think they're smarter about the risks that they're taking. They're more calculated. They know kind of just because you're willing to put everything out there doesn't mean it's the right way or the safest way to do it. And there might be a better way if you step back for just a second and look at it. So I think they're just more thoughtful about it.
And finally, Kimberly.
Wow. Again, how do I, everybody's got such great
I'll pick you first on the next one.
It's I tended to in my first writings was for people who would take up a cause. They would fight for folks and for themselves and for the underdog, and they did the right thing because it was the right thing, but it was a cause. It was something that was really there and in their face, and maybe it's because that was my journey, right? As I was younger and I was trying to figure out the world around me, and I wanted to be the good guy. As I wrote more things, I started to think about heroines in a way of how people deal with everyday life situations. And somebody hasn't handed them something and said, this is the thing to solve, but it's something that they solve anyway because they're flawed and they see the need, and it's something that they rise up to, and they may not even know they're doing it until they've done it. And then they just continue going forward. And it's something that you can see the heroine or just the main characters. I wouldn't even say that they're heroines so much as they're just main characters that are trying to do the right thing, and they've done a good job, and they'll continue to do something like that going forward. You can see that hopefully in their future, whatever that future is, that they'll continue to do the right thing for the right people, and understand if they do something wrong, they forgive themselves, the people around them. So I think a hero in my idea now is somebody who has grace and acknowledges, that things happen and that sometimes you don't do the right thing, but you can always fix it, or you can try to fix it. Maybe you can't fix it, but you can try to fix it and move on. So it's more along the everyday person kind of thing that I write now. And so, yeah, I look back at my old stuff and sometimes go, oh my gosh, it was so, they had to save, just like, I think it was Rachel, you were saying, I have to save everyone. It's not, you don't have to be a role model for everybody. Everybody has different things that they need to do in their lives. So it's about being somebody that you respect, and respect yourself too.
Okay. Great answers, everyone. Kimberly, I'll start with you on this one.
Oh, no.
So what traits do you think your heroine's love interest or support character have to have in order to make them look good?
I think, and I thought about this because you brought this up before, you prepared us for this one, and this is the one that I had probably put the most thought into. And to me, it's there's a give and take. I write romances, so there's going to be two main characters, two heroines, and it's about figuring out how to connect. You always have that, first love, because I write romance, and they want to be together, but just because you want to be together doesn't always happen, right? And but how do they connect, and when the connections aren't completely there, how do you meet each other, and support each other, and it ultimately comes down to being able to accept one another for what they are and what you need from them, accept yourself for the needs that you need, and being able to accept that. And so to me, it's more about being there and just being present for the other person. And that's the one trait, I think, is being present for the other person, to be able to accept who you are and to support them in their growth and their character arc. I think that's probably the most important thing for my characters, to be together and to work together.
All right, Carson.
So kind of riffing off that, but asking them to be someone other than who they are. I'm gonna steal Rad's characters, Cam and Blair. I mean, Blair doesn't ask Cam not to take risks. I mean, maybe in the moment, but, she understands that she has a role to fulfill, and she's not going to ask her to be something she's not. But my pre-prepared answer was someone who challenges, they challenge each other, to be their better selves. And so they're always, someone who's really asking you to elevate yourself and being your best supporter in that way.
Erin?
Well, since my hero is typically flawed and unwilling to admit that they're flawed, then the partner has to have the patience of a saint, first of all. And I say that jokingly, but honestly, I think when I look at writing first responders, there does seem to be an unwillingness to admit that there's something they can't do, or that, going back to the whole, I have to save everyone. I mean, there's no one that I can't try to save. That kind of mentality requires a partner who understands the toll that takes, and what is required maybe, or what the person needs in those quiet moments after the adrenaline rush wears off and things like that. And is also not afraid to ask for what they need, because it's very easy for that to get buried in the, my job is more altruistic or important than yours, and my needs are more important. So someone who's willing to say, well, hold on, I have these needs too, and I have these vulnerabilities as well. So.
And audience, please feel free to post your questions in the Q&A down at the bottom of your screen, because I will be going there for questions for our panelists. Okay, Jesse, your turn.
Along the lines of what Erin said, I think the way I envision heroes or heroines is that, there's expectations on them from the outside world to be the persona of the hero that they are, whether it's a first responder, whether it's whatever their job may be, or if they're Frodo Baggins, they have to get the ring to the mountain. And so there's expectation that they are going to continue to be a hero, and if they aren't, then that's a failure. And so I think a partner, it's important that for a bit, while they're together outside of the view of the public or whoever's kind of making that judgment, that they can put that aside and just be completely who they are, unheroic, messy, whoever that person is underneath the heroic cloak that they've put on. But I think it's also important that a partner is their equal, and it doesn't have to be equally heroic, but I think equal in a way that they respect and, you know, nourishes and feeds them. But I think it's important that they definitely ask for what they need, and that they don't get lost in the relationship as less important.
Okay. But Sam was definitely not less important. So, Rachel.
Listening to all the great answers, I have changed mine significantly. It was initially just going to be somebody who was patient and still ethical. Like, you know, I can wait for you to grow a little bit into the person I see you as, but I still have standards, and if you do certain things, then I just walk away. And I still think that's a really good partner trait, like in general, but especially for the anti-heroes I tend to write, where it's like, you know, there's some give there, but I do have an ethical line, and if you cross certain lines, I can't be with you, not because I don't love you, but because that's my line, and that matters, and I don't think you love me if it didn't matter. But also, I would add to that, I like exploring, like, power dynamics, especially emotional ones, and it seems like the most interesting relationships are the ones where there is equality and equity, but there are different balances of, say, who's going to take the lead more often or in what situation, and who's the person who's always nurturing and the other person kind of needs that nurturing, so they're both kind of contributing in a way. So I like exploring power dynamics, just really love that. And I think that, like, really the best partner is somebody who can kind of grow at their own pace, but still do that besides the hero. Like, they have their own stuff going on, their own growth, their own character arc, their own journey that they're taking. They have their A to B to C, but they're doing it with the person they love, and they're kind of helping when needed, standing back when needed, and there's like this parallel journey that they're taking, and they're not always holding hands, but a lot of the time they are, and they can lean on each other when necessary. So, like that, I mean, just listening to you guys talk about what makes a good partner is, even now, informing how I define a really good romantic interest in a story, and where not everything is always perfectly exactly balanced. That just sounds really boring. But if somebody's going to be a drama queen, maybe the other person just has to be the rock solid. Yeah, that's a really, really valid reason why you should be upset. Yeah, please keep yelling and ranting about it and pacing back and forth like a caged lion. And then sometimes they get to switch, where the drama queen has to go, oh my God, you're falling apart, and I have to be steady, and the steady person's just like, ah! So I like playing back and forth with relationship dynamics, and I think that people who can kind of meet each other's needs, not that whole you complete me thing, but like fill in spaces that need some filling in. You know, be the sense of humor when everything's too tense, or be the tension when nobody's taking anything seriously. So really just, oh my God, listening to you guys, seriously, I'm just like making a list in my brain. I'm stealing all your good ideas. You will not be credited.
Perfect.
Last but not least, Rad.
I would say that about 70% of my novels have traditional heroes, in the sense that I've written about first responders and medical romances, and I've written a police procedural series, but every book has a hero. If you're writing a contemporary romance, or you're writing a historical romance, you're writing a character-driven romance, you still have a hero. That's the person whose story is being told. It's the even if you have two characters that both have an arc. One person's arc is a little bit bigger. And that really is the hero if you're using a traditional story sense. For me, both of my characters usually have an arc. So in a sense, they both have a journey to take. And for me, the most important thing that each of them brings to the other is the ability to see what the other can't see about themselves. Every character in a romance novel in particular has a blind spot. There's something that they can't see about themselves because they don't want to see it. They're afraid to see it because something happened at some point in their lives that hurt them. It's what we call the wound, right? It's the thing that makes it hard for them to connect. I mean, that's the thing that gets in the way of the romance, and both of the characters will have it. And the other character needs to see it and needs to let the other character know that they see it and love them, even though they have this blind spot, as Erin said, and you need the patience of a saint in order to kind of like stick in there as these blocks to intimacy continue to get in the way of two people connecting. And I think that is condensed into everything that everyone else here has said, which is patience, the ability to pick up the slack when the other one can't do it, the willingness to top when the other one can't or doesn't want to. I mean, that comes in, you know, when you're writing power dynamics, that's really important. So I think that seeing and being seen intimately is the most important characteristic that I try to create when I write a romantic pair.
Okay. All right. Carson, this one will start with you. So what is your favorite hero in all your works and why?
That's like so hard. That's such a hard question. And
I gave you enough time to prepare.
I know you did, and so I went back and forth like 50 times. So I settled on one, and it was Catherine Landauer from Leading the Witness. It's a book that came out last November, and she is a criminal defense attorney. The other character is a prosecutor. But Catherine had an event happen to her when she was a child that should have debilitated her. And it didn't. It did in many ways, but it didn't in many. And when the occasion arises, she is a hero. I mean, the book is, like Rad said, you know, the book, there's two main characters, but this is her story. And what she does and how she overcomes her own trappings of her past to rise to help solve this crime is just, I just feel like that was probably the best character work I've ever done. And so that character holds a special place in my heart as the hero of all my books. So.
All right. Jesse?
I've gone around and around on this too. I think if we're going with typical, like, everybody would recognize her as a hero if you just said, what is a hero? Then I would go with Holt Lasher from the Tales of Lasher Inc. She's a bounty hunter. You could put tights on her and people could recognize her in a comic book. But I think for hero, in terms of character traits and overcoming something very difficult and sort of admirable traits in that regard, like Carson said with her character, I would go with Kit from Serenity, which is coming out now. She's in active recovery from a heroin addiction, and she's working through what her life looks like now that she's kind of on the other side of that and how she rebuilds her life. And so I think that I would probably go with Kit, even though Holt definitely holds a special place as well.
All right. Kimberly?
Yeah, like Carson, it's so hard. It's like picking your favorite child, right? But I would go with the Riley Ransom from my first published book, Life in High Def. She was a child actress, and she was so privileged, and she just she came from this place where she wasn't taught anything. She didn't have the right role models, and the role models she did taught her just skewed ways of being in life. It just wasn't real life. And she gradually came to understand what being a real compassionate person in a world full of other compassionate people, because people who are held on a pedestal seem to think that the world revolves around them. And she finally realized that the world didn't revolve around her. But the thing that I liked most about her is that she took responsibility when you didn't expect her to. When she was so used to giving responsibility over to everybody else, anything bad that happened to her, was always somebody else's problem and somebody else had to deal with it. But she did some really bad things, and she took responsibility for it. And not only did she take responsibility for it, she made it right. And some of the stuff that she did, you couldn't make it right. But what she did is she tried to do what she had to do to, even out the balance. And she learned from it, and she was a role model, and she understood that. And then she became a good role model. So that's someone. Her arc was just so nuanced and detailed. And probably spent 10 years writing it, so it should have been. But it was that's Riley Ransom. She's the one, and I don't think she's the best person. I'm not putting it out there, but she's my favorite heroine that I've written.
Brad?
I have 4, but since I only can say one,
You're allowed.
I'm actually going to pick the one that's the most fun to write, and that's Sylvan Muir. For exactly the reason that I started writing the paranormals to begin with, is that there aren't any rules, and I can make her as, absolutely as alpha heroic as I want, because she's a werewolf. And she's an interesting character to me because she's not infinitely strong or infinitely powerful. Her weakness is her family. And so that to me humanizes her, even though I have no desire to humanize her in any way, but it makes her compelling and someone that I think that we can relate to. And I think that's the real key when you're talking about, if we're really talking about stereotypical alpha heroes, is to also make them relatable, so that people can see that they are actually vulnerable and not perfect and flawed and in need of balance in their life. And then if you're a romance writer, that's the key, really. So I would pick Sylvan Muir. Someone said we want all 4. Reese Conlon,
Yeah.
and Rebecca Fry.
There you go. She got all 4. Erin?
I want to throw in my protest for this question too. It's not fair. It's never fair when someone asks you who your favorite character is, but at various times it's different ones for various reasons. But actually, when I really thought about this question, interestingly enough, I did not land on one of my first responders books. It's actually Sawyer Drake from A Place to Rest. And it's because I think that she has so much growth in her story. At the very, very beginning of the book, she's not a hero at all. She's the least heroic person in her family. Her brother and sister are running the family restaurant. She has no interest in stepping up and helping out. She's extremely sort of selfish in her pursuits and her where she places the emphasis in her life. And so I think seeing her grow and sort of accept her place in the family, and also repair some of the relationships in her family. And I think a lot of us, family, whether it's biological or chosen, it becomes a theme a secondary theme in our romances. So I feel like that really connected with me.
All right. Rachel?
Boy, I do not like having to fill you guys' shoes and follow your answers. You could have made them awful so that at least I would have like a lower standard to start from. I would have to say my favorite hero is, from the stuff I've written, is my novels they're urban fantasy. and the two main characters are Ruby and Des. My favorite character is Des, and I had figured that over time that might change. It has not. I love Des because Des has hit like the bottom of her society. She's a werewolf, and she found out about it basically late in her teens, and it's this whole thing. And she at one point kind of went rabid. That point's referred to in the novels, and she came back from that. Like, she literally clawed her way back from just doing awful things to being not necessarily respectable, but someone that she could respect and look in the mirror and say, you're okay. You still have a long way to go, but you're okay. And you're doing better as you go on. And the other character, Ruby, she was kind of where I was at when I started writing the novel. I wrote a novel that's kind of about Ruby trying to become Des. And she has not had as many screw-ups or as big of a bunch of screw-ups as Des has, but it's kind of like I was writing it from the Ruby point of view, kind of trying to get to Des, and now I feel like I've had my Des moment where I've kind of hit a bottom and I'm climbing back up. And that's kind of allowed me to look more kindly on Ruby, who is very whiny, very much an anti-hero. I don't want to do this. I didn't ask for this. Why are you guys expecting this? Why do I have to save you? I just want to live my life. I had a job. It paid pretty well. My apartment was nice, and I feel like I'm not necessarily at Des yet, but I'm close enough to her to look back on the part of me that's very much Ruby and just be a little bit kinder. So Des is kind of my favorite hero because she's someone I would like to be like, and I feel like I'm close enough to her to look back on old me and look at other people a little more kindly too, because I've had the big screw up, several of them, and I realize you can come back from that. Even if you're not the same you, even if you have to be a better you and keep being better and keep rising above it every day or several times a day even, you can do that. And she does that throughout the whole book. And she has moments where she's just kind of like snarky and doesn't want to get with the program, but mostly she is reliable and consistent. And if she thinks something's right or needs fixing, she will do that. And I think I've gotten closer to that. So that's why she's my favorite. It was almost like I was kind of predicting, or at least just making a wish list of who I wanted to be. Like somebody who can still be petty occasionally, but bottom line says, you know what, this needs to be done. No use whining, let's get it done. So she's my favorite. And still kind of Ruby too, because it's like, you got to have sympathy for the you that hasn't gotten quite there yet. Because if it wasn't for them, you wouldn't be the you are now. So anyway.
All right. We have a couple questions that we can fit in from the audience. One is, has anyone thought about writing about the first responders as it relates to COVID, the heroes who are now recognized?
I'm going to jump in real fast because I know we don't have a lot of time. I'm writing that now in Treacherous Seas. Treacherous Seas is an ensemble work which features characters. It's in the Provincetown Tales, so Reese and Tori are prominent, as are some of the other characters. But there is also a cruise ship stuck out in the harbor with a whole bunch of 6 people. And so I don't specifically call it COVID, but it's quite apparent that it is. There's a team from the CDC. There's a physician assistant who is one half of the primary romantic pair, a rookie cop, the docs in town, the locals. So I actually changed the entire plot of the story in March when this happened because I realized I had the perfect setup for it and I wanted to write about it and I thought it's perfect to put it there.
Anyone else? No? All right, I'm gonna do one last question because it's actually one of the questions that I sent you guys originally. Who are your favorite heroes in LGBTQIA books you have read and why? So let's start with Jessie.
Well, a Bold Strokes author, I love the heroes that Bray Willows creates, especially in her Fury series.
Those are my favorite.
Those had me thinking for like months. They still pop into my head and twist me in knots sometimes. So the heroes that she creates are just amazing. And I love Stick McLaughlin by C.F. Frizell. So I would say those are some that I like.
Kimberly?
You know, I was going to go with somebody from Bold Strokes, and I felt like there are so many good authors in there, and so I'm going to go with something that one of the first heroines that was LGBTQI, which wasn't even, it was implied, but it wasn't brought up, is Izzy Threadgood from Fried Green Tomatoes. She's just so fun. She's somebody that comes into my mind all the time. Stuck with me for so long, and she's flawed. Oh my God, she's flawed. But she is. I wanted to be her as a kid. That's who I wanted to be. I wanted to be that person running around doing whatever the hell I wanted to do. I didn't care anything about anybody else. And as you grow up, then you realize that you have a place in the society, and this is your home, and you take care of your own. That book has so many issues in there, and it'll cause all kinds of conversations at any party that you bring it up. But she's the one for me, I think.
All right, Erin?
Well, so I'm hesitant to answer this question at the risk of being accused of brown nosing, but Love's Masquerade was one of the very first LGBTQI books I've read. To me, it's Auden Frost, and I know Hayden's probably like the hero of that story, but she's not. It's Auden. And I just, you know, that book connects so emotionally. Those two characters connect so deeply that it just remains one of my favorites to this day.
Thank you.
All right. Brad, since she mentioned your book.
Well,
I mean, you should probably mention one of mine. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
you're going to get yours in 2 hours in the author recommends, okay? Because I read your book for that. But probably one of my oldest favorites, speaking of anti-heroes, is Kane Casey. You know, she's bigger than life. She's incredibly flawed. She's always interesting. And there's really nobody like her. So I think that says a lot to be able to create a character like that.
Carson?
Wow, those are all great, and I agree with everyone on that list. My choice was Mickey Knight from J.M. Redmond's New Orleans-based PI noir, lesbian noir series. Mickey is, God, she's such an asshole sometimes, and but she always fights for the right thing, even at her own peril, and she is always looking out for the underdog. No matter what, you root for her to succeed, even when she is undermining her own success. So,
Rachel?
My favorite was the first lesbian heroine I ever remember encountering, or two of them actually. It was Rosa Guy's novel, young adult novel, Ruby. I think I read it for the first time when I was 12 or 13. And there was a character besides Ruby, Edith Jackson. And she was just, again, she was everything I wished I could be, while fully acknowledging that I was more of a Ruby. Like, we had a lot of the same backstory, family from, Trinidad and Tobago, like this very West Indian upbringing, and living in New York City, and having to deal with other people that live there where it's completely different, and kind of being shunned for being different, even among like other Black people. And then Edith Jackson fits right in, but everybody thinks she's this no count, and she and Ruby become friends, and then they become more than that, and it's just this amazing odyssey. And it was again a case of me being definitely more Ruby, and I named my character Ruby after that character. But yeah, it was me being more of a Ruby, but looking at the Edith Jackson and going, there's somebody with problems, but there's strength there, and bravery, and just this ability to come back, the tenacity, but also the flexibility to just kind of take a hit, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, keep going. So definitely Edith Jackson, even though I was very much, and probably still am, a Ruby.
All right. Well, those are awesome answers.
Thank you, Anne. Great
Thanks,
job,
Anne.
Anne. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
everybody.